Okay, I know what I should do, and yeah, I know that legally I should produce food that is safe and clean. I also know that the place has to meet OSH requirements, then employment contracts, GST, PAYE, and the courier company can't find a lost order. I mean, is it really important that I understand this food safety thing?
Dave Burnett is not alone. He runs a small pie food manufacturing business that he bought 5 years ago. He's survived the first hurdle of staying in business for the first 5 years, and after 2 years of struggling to find his market, has established a good client base. In his own words, he's doing okay, thanks. Dave's business produces pies. Great taste, naturally, is Dave's byline, and he prides himself on his attention to detail in making a very tasty and succulent product. The fact remains that whilst producing good, tasty food is likely to provide Burnett's with a good business, it is absolutely essential that the pies are safe. One case of food poisoning has been the ruin of similar businesses. Only safe food is good food. For many years, the annual or 6-monthly check from the local council was the only control on food safety, and it has been acknowledged internationally that such spot checks based on prescribed regulations are not totally sufficient. When NASA developed a system that would prevent food poisoning in space, the knowledge was seized upon, and HACCP was born. Whilst the name HACCP, which stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point, sounds complicated, in actual fact, it is quite simple. HACCP is accepted internationally as the best known way to ensure the food you produce is safe. And this is why the Ministry of Health is promoting the option of food safety programs based on HACCP for food businesses of all sizes and types. In every food manufacturing process, there are places where the risk of something going wrong is increased if nothing is done to control it. If we identify this point as a potential hazard, rather like a bend in the road, we can do something to prevent it or reduce the risk. Having first identified the hazard, we have also identified how to control it. We then have to identify the areas or stages in the process where it is vital that the best control possible is in place and that the control will do what it's designed to do. It's like a last chance to get it right, because if you don't, there's the potential for someone to get hurt down the track. These are known as critical control points. The third principle of HACCP is to establish the limit for the critical control points. Drive around this bend in excess of 80 kilometers per hour and there's an increased chance of losing control. Or in the case of these barriers, the driver must stop and wait for the train. The consequence of not stopping means he'll get hurt. There's nothing else that will be able to stop that result. These critical limits for food processing are generally numbers, which are measurable like temperatures or the length of time something is processed. Sometimes a visual appearance is appropriate, such as that all external surfaces are intact. Monitoring the critical limit is very important. In this situation, not only has the speed limit been identified as a critical limit, a monitoring system is in place that keeps an eye on the situation to make sure that the critical limits are being stuck to. Step 5 is determining the corrective action that is needed if a problem occurs, or if the levels of tolerance are exceeded. Fortunately, Dave has taken corrective action that could have cost him dearly. The corrective action must ensure that the potential hazard has been dealt with effectively. In some instances, a short-term fix may not resolve the problem, so long-term solutions also need to be thought of and undertaken. Step 6 relates to the importance of verifying or checking that the system works as it should. And finally, Step 7 is to document the records of the system to prove that the system is working. If there's nothing written down, it all becomes one person's word against another.
Do you really think I have time for this sort of stuff? I mean, really, there's a product to get out, and they want me to look at the system and take notes. Okay, look, if this is what I have to do, let's just do it, okay?
A food safety program for your business is not a particularly complicated process. So let's put Dave's concern to one side for a moment and look at how the system will work in his business. Burnett's Pies is quite a simple process. Dave buys quality ingredients. The meat is cooked, the pie crusts formed, and a filling added. After baking, the pies are cooled and then chilled, ready for dispatch. The raw materials that are used include meat, fish, and vegetables, and they need to be sourced from suppliers that are on track with food safety. The business cannot afford to start off with ingredients containing things they shouldn't. After all, the final product has Dave's name on it, so he'll end up copping the blame. Dave will need to get an assurance from his suppliers that they will supply him a clean, safe ingredient as specified. This is known as being fit for purpose. Cheaper is not generally synonymous with safety or quality, something that Dave found out the hard way. He now visits his suppliers to check out the process to see that they're as onto it as they say they are, especially if they haven't started their own food safety program. So the first control point is the agreement with the supplier of the raw materials to make sure that the product delivered is not only what was ordered, but also fit for purpose every time. But let's move on through the process to where the pies have been cooked. Temperature checks are our first critical control point. This is a stage in the pie making process where it is vital to know that the activity, in this case the cooking, has done the job it's designed to do. That is, knock the bacteria off. If you don't annihilate the bacteria with adequate cooking, you'll have problems later on. The temperature that Dave checks his pies have reached is his critical limit. By writing down the temperature recorded, Dave is providing proof that his pies have been cooked properly. If the temperature is too low, he can put the pies back in the oven for further cooking. By doing this, he has taken short-term corrective action and saved a potential food poisoning outbreak. If his pies are not hot enough after their allocated time and oven temperature, he may have to change his oven setting or time of cooking. This would be his long-term corrective action. Some bacteria will produce spores during the cooking process as a means of self-protection. When the conditions are right for growth, for instance, if the food is allowed to stay warm for too long during the cooling process, the spores come to life. In large numbers, these spores can cause illness, so it's important that the pies are not in the danger zone, 4 to 65 degrees Celsius, for too long. Just like that, we have struck a critical control point. So it's important to cool these pies quickly and safely to 4 degrees Celsius. But for quality reasons, the pies can't go straight into the blast chiller from the oven, as condensation can form in the pies, causing potential problems with mold growth once in the shops. Dave has established a simple control for this critical control point. Cooling the pies faster by blowing air over them with a fan before putting them into a refrigerated situation. Dave has averted the potential hazard of spore production by having an effective pie cooling system sorted out as his control. Dave did some research and found a scientific paper showing him how long his pies could safely be in the danger zone. So he set his cooling system up to make sure he could achieve the temperature stated in the time stated. These times and temperatures have now become, you guessed it, his critical limits. So now we know the critical limits that we need to check at this third stage. One of Dave's staff checks the temperature of the pies after 10 minutes fan cooling, and if they are down to 50 degrees Celsius, they can go into the blast chiller to reduce their temperature to the safe 4 degrees Celsius. Each and every batch is checked, and in reality, this only takes a few seconds each time. So the hazard has been identified and a control point determined. It has been established that the control is very important to ensure the safety of the pies, so another critical control point has been identified. Critical limits have also been established. And now, having a procedure where staff check and document times and temperature, we can say that a monitoring system is firmly in place. The time and temperature of each batch is recorded, and the process continues with a further temperature check after 90 minutes. And again, this reading is noted. If there is a complaint a week later from a customer, Dave can go back and check his records to prove his staff did what they were required to do and all critical limits were met. When the system was first introduced, Dave would have someone check every few hours to make sure that all the new habits of checking and recording were in place. Now that the system is working, Dave checks to ensure that the monitoring and documentation is happening. These checks are now only weekly, and it all seems to be working quite smoothly. This is the sixth principle known as verification. Dave will also need to do an internal audit every so often to check the food safety program is being followed, that it is still current, and of course, that it is working. Dave's advice has suggested that he does his own internal audit or check every 3 months, and that an external Ministry of Health approved auditor is brought in once a year or more frequent if necessary. The final steps of a food safety program is to keep the documentation and records in a way that they can be easily found and used. But what about all the other parts of the process, such as personal hygiene, equipment maintenance, pest control, water, staff training and cleaning? They support the main process, so we refer to these as the supporting systems. It's important to set out in detail what hazards these supporting systems are controlling. The controls will include how these systems work, who does what has to be done, using what equipment, and how often.
Yeah, it was a bit of extra work initially, and I suppose I looked at the whole thing as just another, well, can't do that, must do this. But I can actually see now that, well, apart from anything else, I actually focused on a part of the business that I hadn't thought to be important. Hang on a minute, mate. And this is the reward, a complaint, an investigation. I don't know, somebody reckons one of our pies has made them sick.
The issue facing Burnett's Pies is not uncommon. Someone ate one of their pies and has complained to the local health authority, and an investigation is underway. From the evidence, it appears that the pie could only be at fault if the cooling period after cooking had been too long, allowing harmful spores to multiply to levels that would have caused illness. Dave has gone through the process with the Health Protection Officer and is relieved to find that the records of cooking times and cooling times were not only up to date, but they were also accurate and within the critical limits, despite a few stains. This is very good news for Dave. Not only has the Health Protection Officer left knowing that Burnett's Pies are in good shape, but Dave and indeed his staff have seen firsthand the benefits of having a food safety policy in place. Let's now recap the 7 steps of HACCP, which will be built into your food safety program. 1. Identify all the hazards, assess their severity and risk, and determine controls. 2. Determine the critical control points in your operation. 3. Specify the criteria or critical limits that will ensure control of the process. 4. Establish a monitoring system for these control points. 5. What corrective action should be taken if the monitoring in step 4 indicates the standards are not being achieved? 6. Verify or check that the system is working. And finally, keep records and any documentation of the process.
Well, the good news is that the complaint about one of my pies has been resolved. It turned out to be typical salmonella food poisoning, and that because of the incubation times, it couldn't have been one of our pies. Anyway, it's a great relief to know that the system that I'd moaned about earlier actually works. When I look back at why I was so anti the thing, I suppose it was a fear of not knowing or understanding the reason why. Since then, we, and I mean we, being the whole team, have really got to grips with this whole food safety issue. We've prepared our procedures, and after testing a few, we've tightened them even further. I'm afraid I'll be the first to admit, and I can honestly feel reassured that what we're doing now is food safety. I know, the team knows, and our customers will know. You know why? Because I'm going to be telling them.
As we have said before, Dave Burnett's story is not unusual. Millions of food businesses across the world are faced with a seemingly endless list of compliance issues. But good food is safe food, and every food business has a responsibility, both legally and morally, to provide this for their customers. And when you get it right, as Dave obviously has, it makes excellent economic sense. Help is only a phone call away. And included with this video are worksheets to enable you to look critically at your own business and to assist you to develop your own food safety program. In a short space of time, you'll gain control over food safety and you'll have a program that is your own. In turn, that will give you confidence knowing that your produce is safe, and without doubt, that will reflect in your profitability. Thank you for watching this program. If you need assistance with food safety, please call your local public health unit.